Dave, are we aware of any absences?
No, ma'am. I'm not aware of any absences.
Thank you. All right. I will call to order the Finance Committee meeting of Monday, July 28th, 2025, and ask Dave to please call the roll.
Council President Vitiver.
Here.
Alder Revere. Alder Govindarajan.
Here.
Alder Madison.
Here.
Alder Evers.
Here.
Alder Figueroa Cole.
Here.
Mary of Quorum.
Thank you, and let's let the record show that Alder Revere has joined us. All right, so we have no general public comment. That will take us to disclosures and recusals. Are there any disclosures or recusals on tonight's agenda? Alder Madison?
Thank you, Mayor. For item number 6, I do just want to disclose on the RFP on page 7, you'll see the Progress Center is noted, which is my organization. We received the grant that where we're listed at. Before I was Alder, that grant ends this year. Of course, we don't intend to apply for funding and wouldn't benefit to, from this RFP, nor any changes to it.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any other disclosures or recusals on today's agenda? Seeing none, then we'll move on to the consent agenda. I'll note that items 10 and 11 are discussion items, so those will be separated from the consent agenda. Are there other items that alders would like to have separated from the consent agenda at this time? Alder Madison?
Item number 6.
Item number 6. Alder Figueroa Cole?
8 and 9.
Items 8 and 9. Right. Are there any other items that alders would like to have separated from the consent agenda at this time? Seeing none. Then, President Vitiver, a motion, please.
Move to adopt the remainder of the agenda as approved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt the remainder of the agenda, absent items 6, 8, 9, 10, and 11, with the recommendations therein. Is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor of the consent agenda? Seeing no objection, we'll record that vote, and that will take us then to item 6. Item 6 is Legistar 89042, authorizing the release of the 2026 Crisis Intervention and Prevention Services request for proposals, reflecting modest program and structural changes based on community and provider feedback. On item 6, a motion, please.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt. Alder Madison.
Thank you, Mayor. Hopefully I'm doing this correctly because I'm tired. But I do want to make a motion to re-refer it to the City County Schools Collaborative Committee on August 13th, Finance on August 25th, and back to Common Council on September 2nd.
Second.
Can you say those dates again?
Yep. Of course. The City County Schools Collaborative Committee on August 13th, the Finance Committee on August 25th, and then back to Common Council on September 2nd.
And I believe we're now required to state reasons for referrals, Alder?
Yep, and I won't bore you with the long detail, so I did send an email, so I'll, instead of boring you with the first part of the email, I'll just give you my bullet points briefly. So included in bullet points, a few reasons why I do want to re-refer it. One, the BCC committee, I believe, the Community Resources Committee did not meet to discuss this item, and I do think it deserves some discussion between, on a committee. Since that committee, I don't believe folks have been appointed, or at least I could not find a meeting date. I suggest the City County Schools Collaborative Committee, because at minimum, there will be discussion about young people. Another reason, I do feel that the RFP is kind of lacking structure and accountability that we're looking for. I don't think there's enough built-in insurance for the programs funded through this process will actually be effective or deliver strong results. I do think there can be some potential edits, especially under programmatic requirements on page 10. I like it to specific, potentially say collect and maintain detailed demographic data, participation and outcome data. I think that's strongly important. The other bullet point I guess I'll point to is one of the most important outcomes listed for actually assessing if the program is working is decrease in incidents of violence or conflict involving participating youth, which is on page 11 of the RFP. I like to see language tighten up to something similar to decrease in incidents of violence or conflict involving participating youth, as measured by, an anonymous self-report survey, NPD data on offenses. I think it's important that incidents of violence or conflict are measured in a real and meaningful way. Probably the last thing I guess I'll mention here, because I just put it in an email, I do think there needs to be stronger language in the youth portion as well, where we call out the exact youth that we're hoping to serve, using phrases like disadvantage, at risk, or my preference, proven risk. But I do believe that this should be taken up in a committee for discussion. I did have conversations with Yolanda leading up to this with NPD and several other folks across the city. And I just think just a little bit more tightening, and I think it'll be where it could be better. Sorry for the long explanation, but I did put it in an email.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Evers? So just to be clear, what's before us is a motion to re-refer.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. As someone who was on the Education Committee, as it was once known, and the City County Schools Collaboration Committee, as it is known now, I'm not sure if this referral is to the right committee. I'm wondering why we don't go back to the Community Services Committee, which deal specifically with these types of programs. It's just my experience, Alder and Mayor, that the kind of feedback you're looking for, you might not get at that with this referral. Might be a better committee, more suited for one who's has more familiarity with what we're trying to do, that staff are familiar and working with them. This committee has struggled to make quorum many times and has not been effective in my mind. That's just for what it's worth. Thanks.
Alder, I'm going to ask, I don't see Yolanda here, so I'm going to ask Jim O'Keefe to speak to the unusual situation that we're in with respect to the committees.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So as you know, the Community Services Committee is no more. The Community Resources Committee is the new committee that this council has set up to take its place. That committee has not yet been seated, and so we chose to move forward with this resolution, really in large part out of concern for schedule, because it's a process that we would like to be able to wrap up and get final council decisions on before the end of the year, so that affected agencies know what funding might be available to them or not, and can proceed with their own budgets accordingly. I would say that in response to the concerns that Alder Madison has articulated, Yolanda and her team have had fairly extensive conversations with representatives in county government, county human services, as well as city county public health staff. She's also had some interaction with law enforcement officials. Alder Madison, if there are specific provisions within the RFP that you'd like to suggest, I think we'd certainly, between now and when this RFP is released, we'd have an opportunity to make some adjustments. But the concern that I have, the greatest concern that I have, is that we are on a path now that would have us release this RFP on August the 8th. That would certainly be pushed back by at least a month if these referrals are added.
Thank you, Jim. And just for my part, we have identified appointees to the Community Resources Committee. We are still working to confirm that they are all willing to serve. And then, of course, we have to get that introduced and approved by the council. So we are close, but not quite there yet. So just in terms of what is viable in terms of referrals. Alder Madison?
Yes, Mayor. So I do want to just point out two things in response to Jim. I do know, or at least at minimum in conversations with Yolanda, two things in the last month or two we've chatted about. One, it doesn't look like MPD actually had an opportunity to review this RFP, or they didn't get back in time before this became submitted to us. And then in Yolanda's summary report to me about our last two funding cycles, it also looked like the young people who were most intended to take part in some of those programs ended up not being in the programs. And what I've learned in multiple conversations is that, not necessarily altogether our fault that didn't happen, but there was not, lots of agreements around information sharing. Some nonprofits, for example, didn't have relationships with those young people that they assumed that they would have. So, it was a challenge, I guess I'll just say, for getting them in programs. Now, I am more than willing to drop the referral, but it's also, before this would come back to Common Council for final approval, that's especially the things around data collection. calling out proven at-risk young people. I just think there are a few things in it, and I'll forward you the email that I sent to Alders, Jim, but there are a few things that I would like to see to strengthen the RFP so we get the results that we want and we don't end up, that we have the less likeliness that we'll have the same sort of summary report that we had for the last 2 cycles.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Figueroa Cole.
Yeah, Jim answered the questions that I had regarding timing, which is usually is the concern when these referrals happen. So I'm sure others, including myself, are more than willing to work with Alder Madison and others to get those suggestions on the package before they come to council. So I will agree with I agree with Alder Evers' initial points, but at the same time, it's also clear that we don't have a committee in place for a referral. And I think us as an alders, we can provide the feedback that has been provided here and any other feedback directly to Yolanda and the team and bring those to council. So my questions were answered, but that's where I am right now. I think we can manage this. We have another month. A few weeks, I will say, to get those changes in.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Evers.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just real quick, I think that'd be great if Alder Figueroa Cole and Alder Madison would team up, provide input to staff, and tweak, make adjustments in the RFP, and that we can keep it on the schedule that it's currently on. I think it's very important that staff works with council on when issues like this come up. My guess is that both Jim and Yolanda are very willing to do so. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Madison.
Sorry, this is my very last thought, and then I will have whatever the process to make a motion to drop the re-referral. But in short, I do want to say that I do not believe it should be left to Alder Figueroa Cole and I, especially with Alder Evers having Goodman Pool and the recent conversations that I've taken part in to help strengthen what happens next with young people there. So I think you have just as much to add as Jeanette and I, or Alder Figueroa Cole and I. The other thing I just want to say in general, part of why I think that we end up with outcomes that we have sometimes is because we find ourselves using the inability to meet as like the stressor. And sure, having it a month late, I don't see that as being a stressor for nonprofits. The stressor to me is on the outcomes of what we're funding. So I do just hope people sort of, outside of this and going forward, not use that as the stressor, because again, the stressor is the larger outcomes that hopefully we're working towards. And to me, we should be working towards more so getting exactly what we're investing in, whatever we can do that. So yeah, I'll stop there. So I see Regina has her hand up, or Alder Vitiver.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Vitiver.
It's really just a process question, because what are we actually approving tonight? Because we're saying basically it sounds like we kind of want to send this back with some potential edits, not necessarily to a committee. So are we actually approving the RFP, or do we need an amendment for the motion to say we approve the RFP pending additional changes? So if we could clarify that, thank you.
No, that's a good process question. So what finance is doing is recommending approval to the council. And so you have a range of options. You could recommend approval and as part of the discussion, suggest that there are changes that are needed and that, either detail those or detail alders to discuss those with staff. You could formally include in the motion any changes that you wanted to see. I think we'd probably want to have more discussion if anybody wants to make that motion. Or you could, formally try and amend the language that's before us, which again, I would discourage, because that gets pretty weedy pretty quickly. But the recommendation is to the council. Generally, in cases like this, a committee could choose to say, we're going to recommend this, but we think that staff should work on XYZ thing, and that work can happen between this meeting and the council meeting. So that is an option that's available to you. And now the city attorney is probably going to contradict me on process. Attorney Hatz.
Not at all, Mayor. Thank you. I just wanted to remind the committee that there is a fairly recent also requirement that if any of the underlying documents are changed, that needs to be noted as like version 2 in Legistar, so that everybody is aware that changes have been made even if the resolution itself does not change, or what is being voted on does not change.
Yep. So what's before you right now is a motion to refer. The alder could withdraw that motion, and with the consent of the body, we could switch back to the main motion, which was a motion to adopt. Alder Madison.
Yeah, so I guess I would like to, drop this motion, but also add to the main motion that we would come, or before this comes back to Common Council, I forget the date. I'm in the wrong email, but before it comes back to Common Council, that city staff or CDD staff would work with alders to recommend stronger language around data collection and outcomes reporting for the RFP. And it would come back to Common Council on, would it be September 2nd? I believe it would be September 2nd.
So I believe currently it's headed to the next council meeting.
That's correct, Mayor. August 5th is when we would be scheduled to bring this back to the council.
So August 5th. I think if we're, at least I'm serious about editing it. So August 5th.
Right. So one thing at a time. Firstly, is there any objection to withdrawing the motion to refer? Seeing no objection, that motion is withdrawn. What's back before us then is the motion to adopt, which is to recommend to council to adopt. And so then, Alder, you are making a motion that staff will
work with all city alders to amend the language in the RFP around data collection and intended outcomes.
Okay. Is there any objection to adding that to the main motion? Seeing no objection, then what's before us is the motion to recommend approval with the caveat that staff amend the sections related to data and outcomes. I'm summarizing, sorry, Alder. And I think we've heard some of the suggestions in this meeting. I'm sure Jim has been taking notes, but would invite any alders who are concerned to further communicate with staff about the details of that, and would note that staff do need to correctly label future versions as versions 2, 3, 4, etc. In Legistar, so folks can find their way through those documents. Is there further discussion on the motion or the content of the RFP that we'd like staff to hear about? Alder Bidover.
Okay, I'm sorry. There's one other question, and it has nothing to do with the content. Mm-hmm. It's about the fiscal note. So we're not actually saying we're allocating this money right now because that will happen in the budget. We're just putting the sort of the parenthetical about we think there's going to be this much money. I just want to confirm that that's what we're doing today, that we're not actually right now approving there will be $2,080,000 for this purpose in the next budget.
That is a question for Dave.
The council has not yet approved the 2026 budget, so this is sort of a prospective outlook on what might be available for this program based on the cost to continue process that we've gone through in advance of the budget.
Okay. Further questions or discussion? Comments on the RFP? All right, if not, what's before us is a motion to recommend approval with the request to staff to amend this RFP sections on data and outcomes. Is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor of that motion? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of that motion and ask again that others work directly with staff to provide specific comments on the RFP language. All right, that will take us then to item 8. Item 8 is Legistar 89006, authorizing the issuance and establishing the parameters for the sale of general obligation promissory notes. On item 8, a motion, please.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt item 8. On item 8, are there questions for staff?
Mayor, we have a presentation if you'd like me to go through that.
Please do.
Thank you.
All right, can you see that? Great, thanks. Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Finance Committee members. So this is the 2025 general obligation borrowing resolution that's before you today. Just to go through, first of all, what is GO borrowing? It's tax-exempt debt or taxable debt issued for 20 years or 10 or 20 years, known as promissory notes. We also call it debt or borrowing. We sell it. The city sells that debt to finance capital projects that have been approved in the 2025 budget. Just a reminder that state law was changed recently within the last couple of years, which allows the use of promissory notes for a 20-year maturity. Prior to that state law change, we had to do 20-year debt as bonds, which required an initial resolution and the possibility of a petition for a referendum. Just a reminder that the adopted capital budget includes both new borrowing that's authorized as well as unused borrowing from prior capital budgets. General obligation means that the city will be pledging its full faith and credit through a property tax to repay that debt with interest. The levy to repay this debt will be the 2025 property tax levy, which will be put forward in December of this year, and with those taxes due in 2026. Again, a reminder that there are other city revenues that repay some of this debt, such as tax increment financing or stormwater revenues and so on. We're issuing approximately 45% of the authorized borrowing. And again, just as a reminder, the reason we're not issuing all of it is because of project timing, when we might actually need the cash flow for these projects, and then keeping in mind arbitrage considerations under federal tax law, meaning we don't want to borrow funds too far in advance of the project actually happening. Otherwise, we have to pay penalties and interest on that. So what's before you in the parameters resolution is a total borrowing of about $137 million. You can see the amounts by agency focused on our street reconstruction program, fleet vehicle acquisition, parks projects, stormwater projects, facilities, and so on down the list that you see on this graph. By project and program, there are 529 projects and programs that are being funded through this borrowing. just zeroing in on 19 of those project programs are for $1.5 million or more, and that totals 60 million of this 136 million issuance. And then you can see a lot of that's focused on some of the major projects that the city has underway at the moment. The Imagination Center, the Warner Park Community Center, the permanent men's homeless shelter, a number of multi-year fleet equipment projects, some streets projects, the remodel of this building, the early stages of the John Nolan Drive project, and you can see some of the other examples here. There are also tax increment district tax increment financing loans to developers. This is a history 10-year look at our borrowing for general obligation related debt. And you can see that this year's planned issuance is roughly on par with last year's at that $136 million level. The debt service that will be created through the issuance of this debt, shown with this graph. The blue parts of each of the columns are existing debt, and we pay that debt down primarily over a 10-year period. So that's why you see that decline happening over the next 10 years. The red portion of the column is the new debt service that'll be added from this debt issuance. The green is sort of the remaining years of our capital improvement plan that's currently adopted, and what that'll do to debt service, adding debt service in each of the subsequent years of the SIP. And then we will have, obviously, future capital improvement plans after the 5 years that's in the 2015 SIP. Just a reminder that debt service is principal and interest payments that we pay each year. We add new debt service each year with each year's new debt. And that debt issued in past years is paid off, and it rolls off primarily on a 10-year issuance, 10-year basis. We do have some 20-year debt, but it's a relatively small part of the overall portfolio. Interest rates that we'll see on this debt. This is just a time series since 1988. And I'll show you how interest rates have tracked over that span of time. We have seen some increases in debt service over the last 4 years. We expect the interest rate to remain at roughly the level we've seen over the last couple of years at slightly more than 3%. That's what we call the true interest cost. That's both the coupon interest as well as the impact of a premium that we expect to receive on that debt. So that's a little background on the issuance itself. What's before you is a parameters resolution, and we started that a couple of years ago. This is, rather than having a resolution that's adopted by the council on the same date that that you meet and the bonds are sold. At that time, the council authorized a more flexible approach in selling on the bond, giving flexibility to sell the bonds on a more optimal date. It allows the finance director to carry out the intent that's in the parameters resolution and determining those final terms within the parameters. This approach is used by many governmental entities, and the parameters that are in the resolution before you include the maximum par amount, basically the amount we're borrowing to pay for capital projects, that maximum true interest cost rate, and the maximum amount of cost of issuance that will be paid with the note proceeds. So the parameters in the resolution before you today, 137 million par amount. Within that, about 110 million is 10-year notes, 27 million is 20-year notes, and the taxable component is about $3 million. The maximum true interest cost is about 5% for the tax exempt portion, 6.5% on the taxable, with that maximum cost of issuance being $375,000. That includes bond counsel, registering the notes, and our municipal advisor support. that this parameters authority expires at the end of this calendar year, and we expect to sell the debt on August 19th. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dave. Alder Figueroa, Cole, questions?
Yes, Dave, can you go back to the presentation where you have the debt by year?
Certainly put it up there and we can figure out which slide you mean. Is this the slide you mean?
The one, 7, maybe, page 7?
This one?
Yes.
So that's debt service, yep.
So this is specific to the current appropriation, or is this a combination of past payments and current payments and how they are they move through the years as they come? Can you explain this one again, please?
Sure. So the blue part of the of each column is debt that we've already issued in prior years, and what the debt service is.
All prior years.
Each year, all prior years.
Okay, thank you. That's I didn't catch that. Okay, got it.
Yeah. Okay. Was that it, or you want to?
Well, I mean, I see a decrease as it goes along, and I'm wondering, can you explain? So this is the decrease of that debt, but every year we add.
So right. So most of our debt's paid over 10 years. So when you look back 10 years, so what's happening on the blue part of the graph is something issued in 2015 is now we've paid it off. And then something issued in 2016, we've paid it off. And the new debt that we've issued is the red part of this. So that will result in additional debt service in these out years. And then we'll keep issuing debt each year as noted in the capital improvement plan. And that's why the total debt, the total bar that you see here continues to increase each year. We pay off debt from 10 years ago. Each year that continues to roll off. And then we add new debt and new debt service from that each year. It falls off after 2031 because that's the end of the capital improvement plan time period. And we will have new capital improvement plans each year out. So if we were to look at this in 5 years, we obviously would have debt service in this area here that we don't show now because we don't have capital improvement plans yet.
Thank you, Dave, for anticipating my questions. That's really the clarity I was looking for, that the bar looks down, but that is because our SIP is 5 years loan. So anything you're making projections without having a SIP for 2025. We don't know what other projects will be coming down the pipe. Yeah, that's all I have. Thank you so much for the presentation.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Vitiver?
Thank you, Mayor, and I'm going to apologize to you and my colleagues. I really struggle with understanding TIF and TID. So, Dave, can you help me understand the relationship? You put TID on the geo borrowing, and can you just treat me like I'm 4, which maybe you don't explain TID and TIF to a 4-year-old, but how would you easily explain to me the relationship between TIF and TID and geo borrowing?
Sure. So I'll just start with the geo borrowing. That's the debt the city issues, right? And we have to pay that back each year in debt service. And the funding source for that debt service comes from multiple places. So, for example, in the TIF and the TID area, we may issue debt, let's say, for a street reconstruction project in a TID. And we will then repay that debt, principal and interest on that debt using tax increment from that tax increment district. And that's the connection in effect. So the funding collected in that tax increment district will then be, some of it will be used to pay back this debt issued for a project in the tax increment district.
So we issue the debt, but it doesn't wind up on the property tax rolls because it's getting paid back by the TID income. Am I catching that right?
So tax increment financing is on the property tax. It's collected, it's levied for. It's just a different form of property tax. So it's a part of the tax rate that everybody pays, and it's money that's collected, but rather than it be going to the city's general fund, for example, or to the county, it goes to the city's tax increment funds. And then there's a whole process, I think, as you're aware, where that has to be approved by a joint review board, as well as the council. And that joint review board has representatives from the school district, the county, the technical college district, and the city. And they approve the project plans that then result in the projects that are authorized within each of those tax increment districts. And then the city council then in effect decides, well, how are we going to finance the projects in that project plan? We're going to choose to use debt, and we're going to repay that debt with tax increment. Alternatively, we can use tax increment, pay for it on a pay-as-you-go basis. And in some of the TIDs, we do that depending on the financial status of each of the TIDs.
Another way to think about it, Alder, is to maybe create a parallel that might help you understand is when we have, say, water projects, right? The water utility will issue debt, pay back the debt from the water rates, right? So it's a separate funding stream for water specific projects. When we have stormwater projects, right, the stormwater utility will end up paying back the debt for those projects, right? So when we have projects in a tax increment district, that district will pay back the debt for those projects. All right, Alder Harrington McKinney, questions?
Thank you very much. And President Vidivier, thank you for opening up in terms of speaking as though I want to speak to you as a 2-year-old. So, you're going to have to really pull it down for me. And so if there is a project that is within the TID district that is approved, then the financing for that particular project then comes out of the TID actualization. Am I on target for that?
Yes, within that tax increment district, yes.
Okay, and so the benefits, and I'm saying benefits because I don't know a sassy word for it. If the benefits for this project helps and assists the TID district, who makes the decision, or how is the decision made whether this is a checkoff, yes, it's appropriate, or no, it's not appropriate? What's that process? And I'm complete. Thank you.
So each of the TIDs has a project plan that has in it a list of projects. And that has to be basically, there has to be enough expected tax increment or revenue in that tax increment district to pay for that project plan. And that's based on development that occurs within the district. Those project plans are approved by both the Common Council as well as this joint review board that has representatives from the school district, the county, the technical college, and the city, which are all of the taxing jurisdictions. And then each of the individual projects, in terms of how it's financed, those are also included and have to be approved by the council in the capital budget. So those are sort of the steps of oversight and review and approval that have to occur, as well as making sure that it all complies with state law in terms of the use of tax increment proceeds, the approval of the plans, and so on.
Okay. permit me to do a follow-up question, is that in order for this process that you just described to move forward, what is the introduction process? Is it introduced where? And how?
So the project plans are put together by staff, the TIF team and the Economic Development Division, and then that has to go to both the Common Council for approval as well as to that Joint Review Board I mentioned. At the Joint Review Board level, they have to have first an organizational meeting to review the proposed project plan as well as any amendments to that plan, and then a second meeting to actually adopt the plan. Those meetings are all open to the public. There can be comments, just as with council meetings. Those project plans also have to be approved through a resolution by the council, as well as approved during the budget process in terms of specific projects and their financing. So it starts with sort of the creation of a tax increment district. There's a very specific process under state law in terms of defining what that district is, what are the purposes for which the district will be used, and then there are various tests under state law. For example, will the development occur but for the creation of the district? And so it starts at that level. A district is created that is identified by economic development as well as others, and then that moves through a council review and approval process as well as that Joint Review Board review and approval process. The district's then created, and then a project plan is created for using the tax increment within that geographic boundary of the tax increment district.
Thank you. I am complete.
Thank you, Alder. And Dave said this, but I just want to emphasize again that there are state law limits what kinds of projects we can spend tax increment on. And so it largely limits us to using tax increment proceeds to invest in infrastructure projects. And not, I forget the exact word, but not community serving, like community centers, or I think we can't even build fire stations and things like that with TID funding. So there are some fairly strict limits on what kind of projects we can use TIF financing for, and that is all taken into account when we put together the TID plans.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That helps me a lot.
Thank you, Alder. All right, further questions on item 8? If not, item 8 has been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing no discussion, is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of item 8? Seeing no objection, we'll record that vote and we'll move on to item 9. Item 9 is Legistar 89041. This is the mid-year appropriation resolution. You'll forgive me if I don't read the entire title. Dave, do you have a presentation on this one as well, or Christine?
Christine will walk through this one.
Christine?
Good evening, everyone. Let me just pull up my slides. A quick note to the alders. I sent a link to the presentation around 4 o'clock today, and I found a few typos. So I updated the file and it's reattached in Legistar as version 2. So that's what I'll be sharing right now. And it should be, the link should send you to the right file. But I'll go through a quick rundown of our mid-year projections, provide a high-level overview and some agency highlights for the general fund and enterprise agencies, and then summarize the components of the mid-year appropriation resolution before you today. This table summarizes the total general fund projection. And this is where I had to make some edits because my expenditures included some library fund numbers. So if the totals weren't totaling for you, that's why. But At a high level, in the general fund, we are projecting revenues to be over budget by about $9.7 million. The following slide provides more explanation into why, but the main components here are related to interest and mark-to-market adjustments, similar to prior years. The projections are higher than what we've budgeted for, and agency expenditures are under budget by about $7.8 million or $7.9 million for a total projected surplus of about $17.5 million. In terms of agency expenditures, this is primarily related to centrally budgeted funds for compensated absence escrow, which is paying payouts for retirees, as well as our contingent reserve. And then there is some underspending within agency budgets as well. So as I mentioned, the total general fund revenues are projecting $9.7 million above budget. Interest and mark-to-market adjustments account for $4 million each, for a total of $8 million. $8 million. And then the other large variance here is ambulance charges, which are estimated at $1.7 million above budget, related to Medicaid billings for ambulance conveyances. On the expense side, the total general fund expenses are $7.9 million below budget. And we do budget $4.3 million centrally in direct appropriations for comp absence escrow, and we transfer that to agencies in the year-end appropriation as needed if the payout for retirees causes agencies to have a budget deficit. So for the purpose of the mid-year, we project that at 0. So we expect that number to come down a bit, but that is a major component of the agency underspend. Another component is the contingent reserve, which is budgeted at $2.1 million. And we typically wait until the year end to determine if transfers of contingent reserve are needed. And so that's projected at 0. And then agency underspending totals about $1.3 million. Most of this is in purchase services. And this is across a number of agencies related to community agency contracts, the timing of prepaid software or contracts that span multiple years and when the expenses hit versus when they were budgeted for. And then there's about $300,000 projected underspending in salary and benefits. One note is we do track vacancy rates by agency on a monthly basis. Our citywide total is, for the first 5 months of the year, is about 6.5%. This is about 1.1% less than 2024 during the same time period where we had an over 7% vacancy rate. So the vacancy rates are coming down a bit. And we do account for this in what we call salary savings in our budget, where we reduce agency budgets by an average of 3% in perm wages. But this breaks it down by agency. One thing I will note is that agencies where you see a really high vacancy rate, like 20% or more, these are all agencies that have very small staff or full-time staff. So one person could be 25% or 50% of the agency. CDA redevelopment, PCD office of the director all have fewer than 5 FTEs. So that if those numbers seem alarming, that's why. The next few slides will have highlights by agency, grouped by functional area, and just a few points on each. I probably won't go through every single point, but I'll call out a few highlights. First group we have is public safety, and these summary tables are focused on the general fund agencies. So fire is projecting right about at budget, and this includes comp absence escrow payments or sick leave payouts to date, which are about which are a little over $900,000. Salaries are projected very close to budget. As part of the projection process, we look at all of the different components of salaries, non-permanent wages, so things like overtime, comp absence, and workers' comp are projected over budget, but underspending and permanent wages related to retirements and attrition are making up for this, so that they're close to their budget target. Fire also has some underspending in purchase services related to the timing of some contracts that's contributing to them meeting their budget target as of the mid-year projection. Police is projected to be about 700,000 over budget, and this does include about 900,000 in those comp absence escrow payouts. So if we were to transfer in from direct appropriations to police, they'd have a little bit of a surplus. Their salaries are projecting very close to budget, including meeting their salary savings target and budget efficiency target. And similar to fire, their non-permanent wages are projected over budget. That's offset by special duty revenues and lower permanent wages related to some vacancies and turnover. And there's underspending in non-personnel, primarily related to lower donations for canine and mounted. So there's fewer agency revenues and fewer expenses in those categories. And Independent Monitor is projected to be underspent in purchase services, primarily related to legal services. For the administration agencies, there are a few agencies that are projected to have a deficit. Overall, agencies are most of these agencies are projected to have a surplus, mostly related to salary savings and having vacancies in the agencies. A few of the deficits are related to civil rights, which is projecting a $75,000 deficit related to some higher salary and benefit costs, but mostly related to higher interpretation costs in their purchase services. In the clerk's office, they're projecting over budget by a little over $300,000, and this is multiple components related to salary and benefits costs for having some additional FTEs and capacity for the first half of this year, additional supply costs for a special election that wasn't budgeted for, and about $150,000 related to software for the Blue Crest absentee ballot machine that wasn't fully accounted for when we were developing the budget last year. And EAP is projecting a small deficit related to position reclassifications that weren't included in due to timing issues. It wasn't included when we developed their budget for 25. And then one of the large areas of underspending to call out is IT. That's underspent by a little over $700,000. About half of this is related to salary savings due to vacancies, and half of it is due to prepaid contracts that were paid in 2024 for items that they thought would come online in 25. For the general government agencies, Common Council, Mayor, Municipal Court, Common Council is underspending in benefits because we do budget for benefits for alders that usually isn't fully expended, as well as some underspending in non-personnel accounts. The mayor's office is projecting a deficit related to paying for software that was supposed to be grant funded, and the grant is no longer eligible for those costs, so it's moving to the general fund, as well as some additional consulting costs. And Muni Court is projecting a surplus due to savings in security and collection activities. And the library is also projecting a surplus. Part of this is because there was a $200,000 placeholder in the budget related using fund balance for debt service. And then the remainder is related, about $300,000 is underspending in non-personnel items. Planning and development across the board, all of the PCED agencies are projecting to be underspent. Some areas where there's a larger variance include Community Development Division that has underspending, about $300,000 in underspending for purchase services for childcare tuition assistance and community agency contracts, and Office of the Director that has some salary savings, as well as not planning to spend all of their consulting money for blight studies. So that's some of the larger areas. Public Works Engineering is projecting a surplus of about $378,000. This is mostly related to salaries. Streets is projecting a deficit of about $330,000. This is partly because we over budgeted their salary savings for the year. So they're going to continue monitoring that, but they are under budget in supplies and services. And Parks also is projecting a surplus of $260,000 related primarily to salary savings. And transportation and traffic engineering. The traffic engineering deficit is because they have some agency revenues from federal revenues that are projecting under budget, but their expenses are all underspent. And then I won't go. The slide has a few bullet points about the non-general fund agencies, just a few major items that are included in the resolution. Fleet services is projecting to be over budget in purchase services due to vehicle repair costs. They do have some funding available in supplies because fuel costs are under budget. So the resolution does include a transfer between purchase services and supplies. Golf is having a good year, so they're projecting additional revenues that they'd like to appropriate to cover additional expenses for staffing, supplies, and services. Metro is projecting overall a deficit of about $4 million. This is both updating revenue estimates as well as looking at expenses based on the first half of the year. Some of the revenue adjustments reflect, just looking at the trends of charges for service, updating anticipated partner contracts, updating assumptions around partnership with MMSD, and then expenses are higher than budget, particularly in the areas of staffing and overtime, as well as purchase services. And then the other comments are related to Monona Terrace parking, public health, sewer, stormwater, and water, and there aren't any major changes in the mid-year resolution, so I'm going to skip over those, and unless there are some questions we can come back to. So going into what is included in the mid-year resolution, there are 5 major components of the resolution. I know it's very long, but hopefully this helps break down all of that text. The first item is increasing the general fund appropriations in the budget by $2.3 million. This is both to address some of the projected deficits that we're seeing based on the mid-year projections, as well as qualifying for future state aid payments under expenditure restraint. The second component is transferring funds and appropriating fund balance for carry forward encumbrances. This is a technical adjustment we make every year related to contracts that span multiple years, and it's a purchase order was opened in 24 and the work is ongoing. The third component is related to making intra-departmental and interdepartmental transfers to cover deficits within an agency budget. The fourth component is making a number of other adjustments, primarily to non-general fund agencies based on revenue and expense projections. And the fifth is making adjustments to various capital projects. So for the first part, I'm actually going to hand it to Dave to walk through expenditure restraint.
Thanks, Christine. Just a reminder, expenditure restraint incentive program, the incentive word was added in the last state budget. But basically, it's a program that's been in place for since the early 1990s. And the city receives a payment from the state as long as it keeps the increase in its general fund budget, excluding debt service, to basically the rate of inflation plus some net new construction factor. In return for keeping that growth in the general fund below that factor, the city receives $7 million. So what's happening in the mid-year appropriation is we're appropriating $2.3 million from the city's general fund balance. This will take us up to the maximum amount allowable in 2025 and still qualify for that expenditure restraint payment. This then lifts the base for calculating the maximum amount for the 2026 budget, and will help to fund the various costs in the upcoming 2026 budget, particularly the cost to continue current service levels. We'll also be looking at this again in the year end to address any other deficits and other options that might need to be taken to help address the 2026 operating budget.
So the appropriations of the 2.3 million in general fund balance include covering a portion of the carry forward encumbrances, which I'll describe in more detail on the following slide, and then addressing the agency deficits I mentioned in that first table. So providing $45,000 to civil rights for interpretation services, providing $311,000 to clerk for salaries, benefits, supplies, and purchase services. Within the finance department, there was an error that was found in the cost allocation plan where we charge out agencies, non-general fund agencies for central services provided. So there's going to be a correction to the interdepartmental billings that will reduce the finance budget by, or reduce finance billings by $168,000. So it's providing finance the money to offset that reduction. In the mayor's office, providing $60,000 for the software and consulting costs, and Metro increasing the general fund subsidy to Metro by $1.4 million, primarily for purchase services so that they can fund ongoing operations without hitting budget stops until we review their projections again at year end and determine what other transfers might be needed. The next component, carry forward encumbrances. Again, this is for multi-year contracts where work may have been started at the end of last year and is still ongoing. Those encumbrances are carried forward. We do budget $400,000 centrally in direct appropriations. The amount can be really variable depending on contract cycles, so it's hard to predict exactly how much we'll need. This year, the carry forward encumbrances were a little over $700,000. So we're using that full direct appropriations amount as well as appropriating $300,000 from general fund balance to cover this total. In addition, there are some carry forward encumbrances in the library fund and public health. So about $30,000 in library fund and $235,000 in public health. And both of those agencies have sufficient fund balance to cover those amounts. The third component is intra-agency transfers. So this is all happening within an agency where an agency might be projecting a deficit within a specific major, and they're transferring funds across majors to make sure that they're able to purchase what they need for the rest of the year. For example, the assessor is transferring $35,000 from salaries to purchase services for increased consulting costs. I won't read all of these. These are relatively small amounts within an agency's budget. I mentioned within fleet, they are projecting a deficit in purchase services, and they're making a transfer from supplies. And then in the kind of other category, most of these are appropriating additional funds in non-general fund agencies. The one exception is within traffic engineering. There's $16,000 in a grant that wasn't expended last year. So they're reappropriating that as an agency revenue in the general fund and increasing expenses for crossing guard stop paddles. Within CDA, there's an additional appropriation of $7.6 million in federal revenues and increasing associated expenses for administering Section 8 vouchers. This is based on trends for the first half of the year and what they anticipate federal reimbursement will be. And the CDBG fund, so this is within the CDD agency budget. It's reauthorizing federal funds that lapsed in prior years. And so this is work that was planned previously where we need to reauthorize the budget authority. So this is $4.8 million in federal home funds approved in 2024 that work carried over, and also appropriating $7,600 in home ARP funds where the grant award was greater than the amount included in the budget. Within the grant fund for fire, we're appropriating $37,000 from a lapsed hazmat grant to help support additional personnel and non-personnel costs within fire. Gulf includes increasing the agency revenues by $800,000 and using that revenue to fund increased salaries, benefits, and supplies and purchase services related to operating the golf courses. And in public health, appropriating county revenues for various contracts that were planned for the budget and just not included as an error. And then finally, there are a number of capital budgets that are being adjusted. None of these changes will increase GO borrowing, and some of these are related to various project plans and that were updated since the budget was adopted. So within the library, there's a request to update the scope and project description for central library improvements. Right now, it specifies certain work has to be completed, and the update would give the library director more discretion in how to use those funds. Within EDD and parks, there were several resolutions related to Breese Stevens improvements that came in over the past. There were two resolutions in particular, one that appropriated general fund borrowing in EDD, and one that appropriated TID funds. So it's canceling the GO borrowing in EDD and appropriating TID funds that were approved through a project plan that was recently before the committee this year. Within engineering major streets, changing the funding source for Park Street South from sewer revenue bonds to TID 48 supported borrowing. In parks, appropriating $25,000 in golf reserves for Yahara Hills. And that was originally planned to be funded with GO, but should be funded through golf funding. And in traffic engineering, appropriating $132,000 in federal revenues from a grant. Again, this was intended to be included in the budget, but because of the timing of when it was received last year, it was missed. So those are the major components of the resolution and my last slide. So I will stop sharing and open up to any questions.
Thank you, Christine. Questions for Christine on item 9? Alder Rivera.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Christine and Dave, for the presentation. My first question is kind of process oriented, and I don't know that I've asked this in prior years, but I'm curious, could you share how you and your colleagues on the budget staff develop which agencies you're proposing in the mid-year, for that matter, end-of-year appropriation to help us cover the ERP room?
Sure. So the starting process for the projections is we take a snapshot of actual expenditure data, usually at the start of June, and we do projections on every single agency, and the budget analysts will meet with every single agency. Agencies should be doing their own projections as well, and we will go through our conclusions together to determine, are we really projecting over or under budget in these certain areas, and determine if there may be a deficit in general. In terms of the transfers proposed for mid-year, we typically prioritize areas where there's overspending in non-personnel items, because agencies will hit a budget stop that will prevent them from doing work. In terms of addressing I don't know how to ERIP or however you want to say that. Dave, I don't know if you have anything to add around prioritizing transfers to address that.
Well, I think Alder Rivera, we just focused on those things that were over budget. So, and then a portion of the Metro, as Christine said, that was related to their purchase services, because that could create a budget stop issue for them before the year-end resolution.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just say ERP is what us old timers have always called it in these meetings. That's what the city comptroller staff always called it. So I don't know if that's a new one for some of you. That's why I pronounced it ERP, the acronym. But in any event, yeah, thank you for explaining that. I'll just use maybe one or two examples. Obviously, at this mid-year point, you all are projecting potential deficits for police and streets, among other agencies, but those weren't selected for the mid-year appropriation, but others like the clerk's office and Metro are. I think you've explained Metro in terms of purchase services and so forth. So that gives you an illustration of why I was asking the question. So
Yeah, I think those other agencies, Alder, are related to comp absences, and so we will make a transfer later in the year-end appropriation from the comp absence escrow direct appropriation. So there's sort of a source for that. These other ones are really not related to comp absence escrow or anything like that. So we've sort of bundled those together to get to that 2.3 million maximum.
thank you. And then I just wanted to ask you all, and I know the interim city clerk is with us as well. I don't see anyone here from Metro directly currently, but I wanted to ask for a little more details about the two largest appropriations that we're covering, the projected deficits in the clerk's office and Metro Transit respectively. Could one of you, or for that matter, the interim city clerk, go into a little more detail as to what those, the origin of the deficits are? So as it relates to the clerk's office, for example, I wasn't aware of these reclasses. Obviously, I'm aware of the special election since it occurred in downtown. But if we could get a little more detail about some of the other expenditures that have gone over budget that we're covering in the resolution, that would be helpful.
Thanks, Alder. I don't know a lot about the reclasses, but I do know a little bit about the situation with the Blue Cross equipment. Apparently there's either uncertainty or we did not get complete information about some of the annual costs for from the vendor for, I believe, servicing or maintenance of that equipment that are now being built in, so we have a more accurate picture. And I'm not sure, Christine, if overtime is part of that as well, but a part of that number. But I do know we had some issues with getting the accurate, true cost of that contract with Blue Cross.
And are you? Thank you very much, Mike. Are you saying that these will be ongoing annual purchase service costs for the absentee ballot mailing software, or this is one time since the equipment was new?
Right. I believe that the additional amount due to Blue Cross is because of annual costs, service contract and maintenance. So that they are being, my understanding is that they are being built into the cost to continue budget for the clerk's office.
Very good. And you don't know a lot in terms of the salary and benefit costs. Could Christine, do you have more information on that you could share?
It looks like Erin has her hand up to comment on that.
Well, I'll just jump in and then Erin can add a little bit more to it. So that's the cost of the previous city clerk, some of the termination costs with that. The full year LTE position was hired to assist with workload. And then there were a couple of positions that were temporarily reclassed as deputy city clerks. And so all of that contributed to the higher salary costs than what was budgeted.
I certainly understand the payments for departing staff members. I wasn't aware that we have now. Do we now have several deputy city clerks, at least in terms of their classifications? Or
Yes, we've temporarily reclassed people to help with the workload in the office, given that it is taking us a minute to hire a new city clerk.
Well, I would also say, because we had the spring election, and that was a big help to elevate those two individuals to deputy clerks.
who are the deputy city clerks besides Jim?
Bonnie and Nikki.
I see. And that might be proposed to continue in the next fiscal year or not necessarily?
We haven't had those discussions yet, Alder.
Okay.
But at this point, no, it's a temporary measure.
And there's an additional FTE in the office as well. Is that what that LTE is that's been referenced in the resolution?
Yes, that was a request that was made by the former city clerk to have temporary help, which we agreed with. In her absence, it seemed like even more additional help was needed. So we made that continued that position.
So it's a full-time LTE through the year?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't believe any of the council was aware of these changes in the office.
Yeah, these are all temporary changes to get us through this transition period. And right now, as you'll hear when the clerk's office presents on their operating budget, we're in the process of working with HR and OD on an evaluation of the clerk's office structure, as well as in the process of hiring a new city clerk, to whom the decisions should really belong. But I do anticipate that we'll be looking at adjustments to the clerk's office structure in the course of the operating budget.
Thank you. And obviously, some of us recall that there was a major position study in the clerk's office and reclasses not that long ago. Aaron, did you want to add anything, or was what you were going to help with all covered by the mayor and Mike?
That was all covered by the mayor and Mike.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for that. I appreciate it. Would someone like to then speak more in detail about the projected Metro Transit deficit? Among my questions is it more a revenue issue or a expenditure issue? Obviously, both have been mentioned, both in the resolution and in your presentation, Christine.
So it's really a combination of both, probably half attributed to each one. So really some of the projections on partner revenues are just not coming in at the level in the budget. That's one area on the revenue side. On the expenditure side, it's really overtime. And then when we talk about purchase services, we're talking about the contracts for the paratransit, again, coming in over budget.
I see. On the revenue side, and thank you, Dave. On the revenue side, is any of this federal? Or
no, these are the partner contracts. So like the school district and things like that. So we did expect in building the budget for 25, Metro expected that there would be more revenues from the school district through a new contract, and those have not materialized and are not expected to materialize this year.
I see. Do you recall a ballpark figure of how much that might be?
I think it was around $60,000 to $70,000.
Okay.
And then about $600,000 to $700,000. So overall, the charges for services are about $1.6 million below budget. And in effect, the budget estimates are just not attainable that were put together by Metro for 2025.
I see. And then, do we know has Metro Transit been able to make much headway in terms of hiring additional operators to get at this prolonged overtime issue?
I cannot speak to that. We probably would need Metro staff here in terms of their progress on that.
Mm-hmm. Can anyone speak to Metro Transit? And I realize we don't have a permanent general manager currently, but but how Metro is addressing the projected deficit internally to the best of their ability? Are there ways that they can?
I think they're looking at those issues of how to reduce overtime, manage overtime better. They're reviewing their costs. But the $4 million gap is really sort of their best estimate, even including those internal actions. They're doing something similar to look at their 2026 budget. I think you recall when we went through the cost to continue, that had an increase above this 4 million amount related to where we see trends going with Metro costs, but also Metro revenues. Just a reminder that there was a lot of one-time revenue from the federal government that's now gone. And then there was no increase in transit aid in the recent state budget. And then the vehicle registration fee revenues don't really increase from year to year. And while we've seen increases in ridership, we're still below on the fare revenue and the pass revenue compared to the pandemic. So the only variable revenue in all of that is the general fund subsidy, and it kind of has to make up the difference in all of that. And we kind of went through that a little bit in the Finance Committee meeting back in May, where we talked about the cost to continue and looked at some of those elements of Metro's revenue stream.
I understand.
Alder, I can't speak to the specifics of it, but I'm sure our interim general manager, Knapp, would be happy to talk you through some of it. But yes, that is an area of much discussion and focus. We are always right on the line of being fully staffed with drivers. So we've switched our model several years ago now to a continuous hiring process, and we have regular classes to bring people through, but we're always right on the edge there. And then there are some contractual constraints in terms of overtime and that contribute to the issues, and some structural issues as well. But that is something that they're looking very closely at. And as we have pushed notably the fire department, but also the police department to figure out how we could reduce ongoing overtime problems. We're pushing Metro in the same way.
I appreciate that, Mayor. Yeah, very much. Yeah, thank you. And obviously, as you know better than the rest of us, we're all I know you're in negotiations with the Teamsters, and I'm sure these issues are being discussed at the bargaining table as well. And thanks for bringing up the fire department. I do want to, in closing here, just say I was very happy to see the tremendous improvement they've made in the projection that you shared with us, Christine. So thank you. So thanks, everybody.
It's only taken a decade, right?
Right. Many years in the making, that's for sure. Thanks very much. I'm complete, Mayor.
Yeah. Thank you, Alder. Other questions on item 9? Seeing none, then can I get a motion, please, on item 9?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt item 9. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, then is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of item 9? Seeing no objection, we'll record that vote. That will bring us to item 10, which is Legislator 89291, the internal audit update on the Community Development Division and the vendor master file. And I see that Cola is here with us. Dave, did you want to introduce, or should we just hand it right over?
Cola should be here and should be able to walk through it. He'll just cover update on the work plan and a couple of audits that they've been working on, and these materials are attached to the Legistar file. Sure, there's Cola. Oh, love.
Good evening, everyone. Please let me know if my screen is coming up.
We can see you, Cola.
Thank you very much. I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to present the update on the internal audit activities for the first half year 2025. This presentation will provide a summary of the audit we've completed, highlighting some of the key findings and its implication on the recommendations we've made. It will also feature some of the status of our ongoing engagement, and then discuss some of the benefits that our audit has brought to the operations and the city processes as a whole. Here, this shows the status of the approved work plan for 2025. At the moment, out of the 7 audit projects approved for us, we have successfully completed the Community Development Division audit and the Vendor Master File audit. Key findings and recommendations will be presented in the next slide. We are also currently working on 2 audits, Fleet Services Division and also Cash Count. We have 3 projects not yet started that we are hoping to start immediately after in July. This includes the Parking Division audit, the Employee Assisted Program audit, and then our annual risk assessment that helps us to provide to help agencies to identify and evaluate operational risk and assessing the adequacy of existing controls. Here is the key highlights of the community development finding. We identified during the audits that PCAD and invoices transactions included charges for taxes. This has the implication of unnecessary payment increase, which increases program cost and reduces funds available for mission critical services. It's also indicated a lack of training on or the awareness among staff about the proper procurement procedures. We also observed that there was a delay in the submission of grant reports, which could lead to loss of grant funding due to misreporting deadlines. In addition to that, the audit also identified that grants were awarded to ineligible recipients, which has the implication that reflects poor vetting and eligibility verification processes. Finally, for the Community Development Division audit, we also identified that there had been inadequacy, SOP, and work instruction updates. The implication of this is that it shows inefficiencies and process error, which may lead to financial misstatement or improper disbursement of funds. The following were our recommendations. We encourage the community development management to continue to provide regular training to all employees using PCADs and approving expenses, on the need for us to know that the city is a tax-exempt organization, and making sure that regular training helps to avoid tax charges, which may increase program costs and may also violate the city tax-exempt status. In addition to that, we also recommend for the city's Community Development Division management to implement stronger review protocols for its recipients, thereby ensuring that they have in place tools like reporting calendar, assigning accountability, and the automation of deadline reminders. Implementing these recommendations helps to ensure that the city division continue to meet its submission of grant. We also recommend that they should strengthen onboarding and reporting for expectations for grantees. And finally, we recommended that the Community Development Division should ensure that they have established protocols in place for routine SOP review and update of their processes. Vendor master file. We reviewed the city's vendor master file with the aim of providing assurance to the city's finance management that vendors' records are reliable. That's talking about the data governance and integrity, and that payment activities are effective, ensuring that we avoid the possibility of duplicate or wrong payment. During our review, the following are our key findings. As of January 31st, 2025, the vendor master file contained 9,127 inactive vendors with no transaction since 2025. This increases the risk of duplicate or erroneous payment if outdated vendors' record were mistakenly used during the payment period. It also creates a kind of inefficiency in vendor selection and payment processes. We also identify that we have duplicated and temporary vendors' records still active. The implication of this on the city as a whole and operation is that there could be confusion among staff when selecting vendors, which may lead to potential transaction error. It also compromises the accuracy of financial reporting and audit trail. We also identify that there are excessive and redundant users access in minutes. And the implication of this is that having excessive and redundant users weakens internal control environment and the accountability purposes. It complicates users' management and may also violate the city's IT security policies and segregation of duties requirement. Finally, we also identify from the vendor master file review that there is a lack of formal SOP for vendor file management. This has the implication of ensuring that may lead to process inconsistencies and reliance on institutional knowledge rather than documented guidance. Where an employee who has been doing it decides to leave the services of the city at any time, such employees goes with the industry knowledge, and it may impair the continuity of the processes. Here are some of the recommendations we made to ensure that this is curtailed as much as possible. We recommended the deactivation of inactive and duplicated vendors with management approval. We asked the finance management to perform a routine vendor cleanup and deactivate all inactive vendors, which helps to ensure that the data integrity, reduce system maintenance and storage costs associated with having a high vendor database. We also recommended the finance management to implement an annual vendor reviews. Implementing an annual vendor review helps to ensure that we check the consolidation of duplicated records and validation of the data. We asked management to consider conducting regular access review and cleanup of redundant roles. By doing this, we are enforcing role-based access controls and removing redundant or outdated roles. Finally, on this, we recommend that the finance management should develop and maintain formal SOP for vendor file processes. This helps to ensure that we avoid inconsistent vendor management practices and control breakdown due to lack of standardization. During the course of the year, the finance management was approached by the alcohol review committee, license review committee, to conduct a special audit. We conducted a special audit on the license review of 2 restaurants, Chiba Hut, which is also known as Two Peanuts, and 7 Iron. We conducted the restaurant operators and owners and initiate the compliance audit. The goal of the audit is to verify the accuracy and the classification of gross receipts from food and alcohol, and also to ensure that there is a compliance with the city's management or the city's general ordinance that says sales of alcohol should be within 50% of the gross profit of the gross sales of the restaurant. We requested documentation and review documented provided to establish compliance for activities between January 1st, 2023 and to May 31st, 2025. The audit report and finding is currently being reviewed by the senior management before we release it back to the alcohol review committee. Here are some of the potential cost savings from our audits this year. By reviewing our activities, we have ensured that tax overpayment is prevented by identifying that we pay taxes as a non-tax organization. We also ensure that we reduce the possibility of ineligible grant disbursements to non-qualifying sub-recipients. We ensure that duplicate vendor payments are eradicated as we review the vendor master file. And we also ensure that IT access management is efficient in order for us to continue to meet the standard that has been set by the city IT department. And finally, our review has helped us to ensure that there has been potential operational process improvement. These are some of the value add to the city to what the services that we have rendered in the first half year 2025. We continue to monitor and strengthen internal controls by ensuring that we detected and corrected control deficiencies before they lead to major financial loss or operational disruptions. We continue to support citywide risk management by providing insights to emerging risk, fraud vulnerabilities, and operational inefficiencies. We also continue to enhance governance procedures by highlighting areas where transparency, oversight, and delegation of authority may need to be strengthened. The internal audit continues to enhance the city's operational efficiency by streamlining of workflows and elimination of redundancy, by ensuring that we have stronger alignment of operation with strategic objective. And finally, we also ensure that we have complying with regulatory requirements and reporting accuracy by verifying that departments and programs audited operate within established legal and policy frameworks. Next steps for us is to finalize our ongoing audit, which is the fleet services audit and the cash counts audit. We will begin immediately after that with the Q3 and Q4 scheduled audit, and then we will continue to monitor the implementations of the audit recommendations that we have made for previously conducted audit, while we continue to focus on risk-focused audit planning for 2025 and 2026. Thank you.
Thank you, Kola. Questions on item 10? Alder Verveer?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Kola. You know how much we appreciate that we now have a robust internal audit unit again in the city. So thank you for your leadership and for your update today. I wanted to ask you about the CDD performance audit mainly. And that is, will we be receiving a written report, a written final report for the CDD performance audit beyond the PowerPoint slides that you shared?
Yes, the report is included in the. I sent the report earlier, and I think the report is included in the packet, the meeting packet for today.
I don't see it in Legistar for this item. We do for master vendor, but not for CDD. And if you sent the email separately, I apologize. I missed it.
Okay.
How long?
We'll
Could you
attach it.
resend?
We'll attach it, Alder Verveer. It's also available at the internal audit webpage as well. But we'll send both of those to you and the rest of the committee.
Great. Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Kola. Typically, we invite the director of the agency that this was a subject of the performance audit to say a few words in this meeting. I don't know if CDD Director O'Keefe was aware of that or not, but I have certainly taken note that Jim is here along with most all of his senior staff, and I appreciate their attendance tonight. Jim, did you wish to respond at all to the performance audit recommendations and what your organization is doing in terms of implementing the recommendations?
Sure, Alder Verveer. I'll say a few words. I'm joined by Lynette Rhodes, who is a central player in the work that was done in support of this audit. So we're no strangers to audit in CDD. We undergo those regularly, and this was, I will say that this was a rigorous one. So we welcome the scrutiny. We came out of it, I think, reasonably well. There were 4 findings that, though I certainly don't want to diminish their importance and the need for us to, improve our attention to some matters. They were, I think, relatively modest given the breadth and the really the increased volume of activity that has happened out of CDD. So we slipped up on I think the presentation mentioned neglected to exclude charges for state sales and withholding taxes. That's something that we certainly know about, and it was not done on a wholesale way, but some of the records that were reviewed indicated that we need to to be more more careful in that. So we've taken steps already to address it. There was a finding about delayed submission of grant quarterly reports. Alder, that the volume of grants, large and small, that we've gone that have come through the Community Development Division has really increased in recent years. Don't mean for that to be an excuse, but this particular point, I think, focused on this and the next one, the instance where non-eligible participants were awarded grant funding that should not have been. They involved a small grant. So we'll redouble our efforts to pay attention to those matters. And then the last item involved the standard operating procedures. It's something that we have worked on over the years. It's something that we've committed to making of an effort across all of our program areas to put in place and to regularly update. That's something that's going to take a little bit longer. So all in all, again, given the high level of activity and the work that we do with community partners, I thought we performed pretty well under the audit.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jim. Just perhaps one follow-up question. Did you say that the concern about ineligible subrecipients was really just one organization during the audit period?
Yeah, that was, I believe the program area was a small state grant that dealt with employment training, and it was focused in particular on looking to support clients that were experiencing housing instability. And so the community partner was found to have approved for assistance under that grant program. One or more participants that did not meet that homeless eligibility threshold. But again, I think Alder, the point is that it was an isolated, not a regular or widespread situation.
I appreciate that, and I'm sure you've always had protocols to ensure that doesn't happen. And as you said, you'll redouble the efforts in that area as well. Thank you. I appreciate you responding to the audit results and recommendations, Jim, very much. And thanks again, Cola, for your work and your regular updates to the Finance Committee. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Vinover?
Thank you. I just had a question about how the different entities were chosen for the ALRC review and kind of what the plan's going forward, just because we got a lot of entities in the city and it could get real expensive to try to audit a lot of them.
So, Council President Vinover, that is a decision of the Alcohol License Review Committee, and they make that decision based on information received by them. The Finance Department is then required to perform the audit based on that request from the ALRC.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Figueroa Cole?
Thank you. I actually had the same exact question. But in addition to that, I was expecting this item to be specific about the Community Development Division and the vendor master list. So I'm confused as to why is this part of this presentation, or is that part of the process to communicate those audits to the Finance Department, the ARC ones?
The presentation was just about the work plan and the work effort of internal audit, in addition to the audits that are on the work plan. And this ALRC audits were added recently. So we're simply updating the committee that that's a part of the work effort of the internal audit unit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Rivera, additional questions?
Yeah, thank you. I thought I'd just help respond to the council president's question, and so I'll do that. The city ordinances specifically state that the ALRC has the power to request audits be conducted on license holders, and the ordinance is quite clear that is one of the few powers the ALRC has independently that doesn't require council action. It has been several years since the ALRC has ordered such an audit, and this year at renewal time in May, at our May renewal meeting, the city attorney's office recommended that we actually ask the finance department staff to conduct not one, but 2 audits. So after a period of several years of not requesting any audits be conducted on license holders, COLA is in the midst of, as he shared with us in his work plan, 2 audits, again, ordered by the ALRC. Those results will then be reported to the ALRC, not to this committee, for the ALRC to consume and discuss next steps with those 2 establishments. The 2 establishments, by the way, are both downtown, Chiba Hut on West Gilman Street and 7 Iron Social on State Street are the 2 I realize in the audit update and the work plan update. The corporate entities were mentioned, but those are the 2 doing business as is to further share information with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Any additional questions or discussion on item 10? If not, thank you, Cola. Appreciate it. And we'll move on to item 11, which is Legistar 89290, a briefing on bargaining with MPPOA. And Kurt Rose is here. Kurt?
Can you all see that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kurt Rose, and I serve as Employee and Labor Relations Manager here for the City of Madison. I'm going to do an overview of bargaining that's coming up for our protective services. So a little bit of background. We've had additional health contributions for our protective services to ensure equity with general municipal employees in our previous contract. We've had an average increase in previous contract period of 2022 to 2025 for protective services at about 2.38%. So that's the average salary increase there. Current agreements, we have current agreements with both fire and police through December of 2025. And our bargaining is set to begin on July 30th with MPPOA, which is our police association, and then approximately in September for fire with 311. If you see the graph here, this is just the annual percentage increase by each employee group. So the teal bluish color is protective service. Our yellow gold is our general municipal, and then the purple is the Teamsters. The yellow gold, you might see the increases there because just last year we got to parity amongst the general municipal and the protective service. So we got to parity there amongst the 2, where you can see that they are the same here in 2025. But that is just a visual overview of the background of our increases since 2018. And then our current 12-month CPI is at 3%. So the traditional process will occur. So we'll have a development of initial proposal and review of bargaining strategy by the City Finance Committee. There will be a public notice of the initial exchange. Then the initial exchange of offers in open session with reservation to amend. Then there's subsequent closed bargaining sessions. Then our tentative agreement with wages, hours, and conditions of employment. Then it'll be ratified by the union and then ratified by the city at Common Council. So just a few things to bring back into attention about the bargaining rules. So we have some things that may not be bargained, and that's a counter to state or federal law. So any state or standing federal laws must prevail. We cannot bargain against those. And then any health care plan design. So we cannot bargain against that with those. What can be bargained are permissive subjects of bargaining. So you have your uniforms and equipment, you have your training, and then you have your staffing. So those are things that may be bargained, but may or may not happen in each bargaining session. And then you have your mandatory subjects of bargaining, which we absolutely have to bargain on, which are our wages, our hours, and conditions of employment. And so that requirement or ability to bargain does not mean the parties must come to agreement. It just means that we are required to do so. So the scope of bargaining, so within the scope of our bargaining are our pay and special pay provisions, our leave and hours of work provisions, our grievance handling and resolution, so how we do that, how we go work through our grievances, uniforms and equipment, so those pieces, health insurance and other employee benefits, and then legal protections. And then areas of concern that are at discretion of the chief, but are not in our collective bargaining agreement would be our standard operating procedures and policies. So that's any policies and procedures that we have that are controlled by the chief, staffing and staffing related decisions. Those happen at the chief level. Disciplinary processes, and which are required to be overseen by our police and fire commission. Any investigative processes, equipment used, and body-worn cameras and militarization, and then training, and also our community oversight are at the discretion of the chief. So this is generally a confidential process, but additional steps are being taken to ensure transparency. So we're doing an initial briefing at the Finance Committee. We'll have availability for additional briefings to the PFC, the PCOB, or other committees as requested. Our regular closed session Finance Committee updates will occur, and then we'll be developing summary information for external communication. So our next steps are to schedule our initial meeting with fire, finalize our cost and proposal, and then our initial open bargaining session is July 30th for MPPOA. IAFF, which is fire, will be approximately in September. And I'm going to stop share and see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Kurt. Any questions on item 11? Alder Figueroa Cole?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Thanks for the presentation. So on one of the slides, there's a mentioning of a initial exchange of offers in open session with reservation to amend. Can you please elaborate what that means?
Yeah, so there's an initial open session that we come together with full proposals to identify those pieces. That open session is open to, I think, the public, and folks have the ability to have that conversation. And after that, we go into our closed bargaining sessions. So that is, we haven't gotten to that point yet with either of these, but folks will know about those to be able to see what we're discussing within the closed bargaining sessions.
So are those public meetings that people get invited to participate on?
I'd have to double check that. I think Aaron's on the call. Is that a public meeting, Aaron, for folks to come into? I'll get some. Oh, she's here. She goes.
Okay, that sounds. Oh, she unmuted herself.
Hi there. It is typically a public meeting. I believe there was a change in requirements such that it's not absolutely required to be a public meeting anymore. But I can double check on that and get the information too.
Thank you. And then the second question is on regards to this slide about scope of bargaining that says areas of concerns at discretion of the chief, not in CBA, and includes the standard operating procedures. And I understand that there are standard operating procedures that MPD puts together, and they usually get approved by council every quarter, or changes get approved. But don't we also have some procedures that are controlled by the unions?
So there are procedures that are included in the contract that we agree on in the CBA, but as far as how we go, those are generally there as a framework. But how we build together what the policy looks like in a step by step is under the purview of the chief. So the CBA or the collective bargaining agreement will spell out like here's these particular components here, there, or the third, and then we would build a process or procedure from the internal level of how we are still aligned with the CBA, but not to the granular nature, if that makes any
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you. So for the finance committee, most likely will be, we are part of this because it impacts the budget. But do we have an available list put together of what those agreements are that they have in their contracts, and which of those are negotiable versus not?
So we have the current contract that is current, the current contract of the CBA. I don't have a list. Like I can look at the contract and get you a list of what things might, or maybe you and I can set up a meeting to discuss a little bit further of exactly what you're asking me. Because we have the current contract. The current contract is there. We're working to, begin the bargaining sessions. We'll have, when we come to you all to talk with the finance committee, we'll have all the things that we're looking to move forward that have a financial component. But before we start, we don't necessarily have that list. I don't know if you're asking about that list or a different list.
I would like to have more clarity for the public and for the elders on what are the negotiations that creates those standard operating procedures to begin with. Because when that slide that says that they're under the purview of the chief, or the chief of police, the chief of fire, or even Metro, like you just explained a minute ago, they're really not born within a department. They come from these bargaining tools, and then we create standard operating procedures. So I would like to have more clarity and visibility on where those demands come from and what the demands are. So we can sit down and talk more about that, but that's what I'm looking for. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think that would be a good conversation. We can have that conversation.
I think given the confidential nature of bargaining, it's not likely that we could have a report on the content of the bargaining until afterwards when we have come to an agreement. So we're not going to be able to share what they're asking for before we come to agreement on a contract.
I understand that, but I would like the minimum to see what we agree upon, because that's kind of fuzzy for me. Like, what is the current contract today? What's there?
I think
examples of that.
If I'm understanding you correctly, Alder Figueroa, what Mayor, I think what she's asking is to have a understanding of what our current contract looks like, and then how that may have transitioned to some of our policies and procedures that are on the other side, and so that she has a better understanding that when we come forward with our results from the bargaining, she'll understand where we might be going. Does that make sense, Alder Figueroa? Is that what you're asking?
You got it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so we can set that up.
Thanks.
Sure. Any other questions or discussion on item 11? Seeing none, then thank you, Kurt.
Thank you all.
That is the last item on our agenda tonight, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. Is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor of adjournment? Seeing no objection, we stand adjourned. Have a good evening, folks. Stay cool out there.